good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and good evening for those who are joining at night. I warmly welcome you to the Risk Reduction Hub on Disaster Risk Reduction in Education webinar organized as part of the midterm review of the Sendai Framework for the Disaster Risk Reduction 2015-2030. This event is co-hosted by the Global Alliance for Disaster Risk Reduction and Resilience in the Education Sector, GADRRRES. I'm Ruth Custode. I am the Regional Education Specialist at the UNICEF Regional Office for Latin America and the Caribbean. I'm also co-chairing with Save the Children, the Regional Education Working Group for Latin America and the Caribbean, one of the two regional affiliates of GADRRRES. I'm honored and excited to be moderating this important event. In the past 2 decades, 1 billion of children have had their lives and education disrupted, and 80,000 or more plus schools have been damaged or destroyed by disasters or attacks. We continue to learn the wide-ranging, profound impacts and vast inequities on children's education from the global pandemic. And if we see just over the past year, we have witnessed devastating flooding in Pakistan last summer, war and displacement in Ukraine, extreme temperatures in Europe, and of course, the Turkey-Syria earthquakes in February. All those events disrupted education and threatening the future of our children. 2023 marks the midpoint in the implementation of the several sustainable development frameworks agreed upon in 2015, including the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, the Addis Ababa Action Agenda for Financing for Development of Paris, the Paris Climate Change Agreement, and the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction. Within this context, the UN General Assembly decided to hold a midterm review of the implementation of the Sendai Framework 2015-2030. Convened by the President of the General Assembly, the high-level meeting of the General Assembly of the Midterm Review Framework take place from 17 to 19, 2023 at the United Nations headquarters in New York. So right now, they are together working in the midterm review. This risk reduction hub event on disaster reduction in education organized a few hours prior to the adoption of the midterm review. Hello, you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, Lucille, you hear before what I said or no?
Yes.
Okay. So let me continue. Please put your microphones on mute. So as I was saying, we are just before the adoption of the Midterm Review Political Declaration. And this is a great opportunity to take a stock of the progress made in translating the Sendai Framework's commitments in the education sector, review challenges, face and solutions to address this. It follows several other events, included the Comprehensive School Safety Framework 2022-2030, global launch and the UN Transforming Education Summit in 2022, and preceded COP28 in Dubai, on the occasion on which education will be high on the agenda. So I'm delighted to give the floor now to Mr. Jair Torres. Jair is going to give out the introductory remarks. During this meeting, we are going to send the Sendai Framework and the education and the relation between both. An analysis of the education focusing on the review of country submission for the midterm review and the Sendai Framework for disaster reduction. And then we will hear about a practical framework to promote disaster reduction, child rights, and resilience in the education sector, the Comprehensive School Safety Framework for 2022-2030. We are going to have the honor to hear a brief government statements from Zambia and the Grenadines, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Mozambique. And then we are going to close with, if there's time, with some question and closing remarks. But we understand that we have a very packed agenda, as you can see. So we encourage you to please post your comments and questions in the chat. As we go along, a chat moderator will answer your question and we will report back to you on any unanswered question, as well as share links of the recording. So now we open this session with Jair Torres. Jair is the Program Management Officer at UNDRR, and he will give us a brief opening remark. So Jair, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ruth, and thank you, everybody. Thank you for organizing this Resilience Hub in the framework of the midterm review that is now happening in New York. I think that the issue of education and school safety is very important in order to advance the agenda that we are trying to reach with the Sendai Framework, and also with how the Sendai Framework and the other agendas go together, and the role of education in climate change action and in sustainable development. So very quickly, I just would like to start with the key message that come out from the midterm review that we have implemented. So the first one, that is a very scary message, is that really disasters continue increasing due to the human activity, and we see that their impacts are really rapidly overwhelming our ability really to cope with them in every single country. The impacts of disasters has been increasingly really unequally, notably in developing countries where they have been hit the hardest. And the midterm review, you know, the analysis that what has been done reveals that the number of people affected by disasters, it is expected to increase by 80%. Has been increased by 80% since 2005. So actually, since we started the first framework, that was the Hyogo framework. But the good news is that, you know, we can prevent disasters. And this is really what we are aiming to do now. And we can prevent these disasters really if we take a holistic approach to them, and we stop really tackling every single crisis in isolation. So as we saw, for instance, with the COVID pandemic, we need to start thinking in a multi-hazard approach, and we start tackling emerging and current hazards and risks, not only from the traditional ones like the geological or the hydrometeorological, but also including those that are really rising out, like the environmental hazards due to the biodiversity degradation, like the technological hazards, or the biological, something that we saw with the COVID, and how really it affected many of the countries in the world. You know, in some of the reportings, and we know internally that this reporting, you know, is not as appropriate as we would like to have, but in the reportings, in many of the countries in the world, or I will say in all of them, the basic service of education was disrupted. And this is one of the targets of the Sendai Framework. You know, we are talking about how we can substantially reduce damage to critical infrastructure and disruption of basic services. Now we are really improving the way how we build the schools and how they cope with different hazards. But the service of education has been producing a lot of disruptions, not only in the education of many kids, but also in how they're gonna access to jobs, how they're gonna produce new elements, etc., etc. So I think that one of another key message that is coming from the midterm review is that now many countries in the world, they really recognize the crucial role of education systems in enhancing resilience. And also that the UN system has been working as delivering, is working and delivering as one, as is the case now for the Global Alliance, on which one, not only the UN system, but also other major actors on school safety are coming together to support really governments on standardizing methodologies for assessing the vulnerability of schools, for standardizing methodologies in order to have a common understanding about what school safety is, and etc., etc., and providing a lot of elements for governments really to ensure that we are implementing this fantastic framework that is the comprehensive school safety framework that has been put in and adopted by many countries in the world. So I would like to finish with this. I think that the challenge that we are facing are very important. The role of education on that multiple crisis that the world is facing is really very, very crucial, because without education, we will not be able to cope this crisis. And it's very important that we continue working together in order to prevent those disasters that will emerge in the coming years. And it will be very important to understand the role of education on that element. We need to continue making this as a whole government approach. Ministers of education need to stop working on isolations. They need to continue working with other ministries in order to ensure that the comprehensive school safety framework is implemented in a holistic way. Relations with ministers of health, with ministers of planning, with ministers of finance, with ministers of telecommunications are now considerably important if we really want to ensure school safety and the continuation of education in each of the countries and in each of the territories worldwide. So thank you for inviting me for these introductory remarks. Over to you, Ruth, and I wish you a very nice webinar today.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jair, and thanks for those important remarks. We are now delighted to pass the word to Mr. Soichiro Yasukawa, Chief of the Disaster Reduction Unit in the Science Sector of UNESCO, for an overview of the Sendai Framework in education. So please, Mr. Soichiro, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ruth, and hello, Excellencies and ladies and gentlemen. So I'm going to elaborate a little bit on the relationship between the Sendai Framework on disaster risk reduction and education sectors. As you know, the Sendai Framework for disaster risk reduction was approved in March 2015, which was one of the first global framework which were approved in 2015, together with the Sendai SDG or Paris Agreement, etc. So the Sendai Framework has a big structure, which is 7 global targets, which are very ambitious to have a concrete targets, and also the 4 priority of actions, which I will explain in the next slide. So among the 7 global targets in the Sendai Framework, number 4, the target D, is to reduce the damage to the critical infrastructures, and which critical infrastructure includes health and education facilities, which is very related to the educational sectors. And each target, including target D, has several sub-indicators to have detailed indicators to monitor the progress of the implementation of the Sendai Framework. So 2 of the 6 sub-indicators on the target D is first one is number 3, education of decrease the damage on the educational facilities, and then the other sub-indicator is to decrease the disruption to the educational services. And also, because the Sendai Framework is one of the first international framework in 2015, this target D is also included in SDG indicators. So please go to the next slide. So as I mentioned, Sendai Framework has 4 priority actions, and each of the priority actions are closely related to the education sector. Priority 1, we say it's understanding risk. I think we need to understand what are the hidden risk or underlying risk. In order to do this, we need academic sectors, or we need education, educations to conduct risk assessment. And the second priority is risk governance, which we call for the multi-stakeholder engagement. Of course, we need to include not only the government or academics or civil societies, but also the education sectors to work together to make a planning and also its implementations. And the third priority is investment. Yes, especially on the school facilities, we need to invest on the safer school facilities. And yes, so this is also related to the education sector. And the last one, which we call for the build back better. Yes, we need to learn lessons from what happened by the disasters, and we need to build back better, which also include education sectors to build back better from the past disasters. And the Sendai Framework also has a section of the role of stakeholders, which include education sectors. Next slide, please. Yes, and in few hours, we are going to discuss that we are going to launch the declaration of the Sendai Framework, Sendai Framework midterm reviews. And there are several mentioning on the education sectors. So first one is related to the priority action 3, investment. So first bullet point is about is related to the priority action 3 for the investment. So we need to make integrated and inclusive measures, including education, culture, or other different disciplines. And the second mentioning of education is related to the priority action 1, which is understanding risk. And here also, in the declaration, in the draft declaration, we talk about the importance of educations to do the risk assessment or understanding the risk. So thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Yasukawa. Thanks for this comprehensive overview of the linkages between the Sendai Framework and education. I'm now going to hand over the floor to David Kianaute, the climate change and education consultant in the education sector of UNESCO. His presentation will highlight key findings from an education-focused review of country submission for the midterm review. So thank you and welcome, David. The floor is yours.
Good morning, afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. So maybe we will go to the first slide. So I think the previous speakers have already introduced the midterm review of the Sendai Framework. And so this presentation is about an initiative by GADRRRES to review all the submissions by countries which have fed this process. So the political declaration is the outcome of a consultation process with member states and other stakeholders. And so last September 2022, quite a few countries have made a submission. And so on the Sendai Framework implementation, and we decided to review what they wanted to say about education in their submissions, whether they refer to education a bit, at all, or a lot. Yeah. So this is what this presentation is going to cover. Next slide, please. So yeah, about a third of countries, like 60 countries, have made submissions for the midterm review last year. And so as you can see on this chart on the left, not all regions have been really represented and able to make submissions on time. And so, for instance, we have a few regions such as small island developing states, SIDS, from the Pacific, who have not been able to make submissions as part of this process. So just to say that the findings are reflecting what has been shared by countries which were able to submit. And on the right side of the slide, you can see that somehow education has been highlighted as a priority by countries. Like 80% of countries have mentioned education in the submission. This goes from quite minor references to education, maybe one reference, to submissions where education is quite present. So just for example, the submission of Bosnia and Herzegovina includes like 130 times the word education and 80 times the word school, meaning that education has really been showcased as a key sector for the implementation of the framework in that country. Yeah? Next slide. So the review was really based on the 4 priorities for action of the Sendai Framework, which have been introduced by Soichiro a few minutes ago. And of course, we have also tried to make linkages between the 4 priorities and the 4 components of the Comprehensive School Safety Framework, CSSF. Number 1 is enabling systems and policies. Then we have pillar 1 on safer school facilities, so school buildings. We have pillar 2 on school safety and educational continuity management, so like disaster preparedness. And we have pillar 3 on risk reduction and resilience education, so which means integrating GADRRRES into curriculum. So that's how the review was structured. Next slide, please. So first, countries have highlighted no contextual changes since the adoption of the Sendai Framework in 2015. And one of these observations by member states is that they have to deal with now this growingly systemic nature of risk. And of course, the COVID-19 pandemic, which has impacted all sectors, including education, has been really a main factor of disaster management over the past few years, which was highlighted by countries. And then the second point, which was highlighted in terms of context, is that countries are really deeply concerned about the escalating climate crisis, which is really jeopardizing the future of children and young generation, and so therefore the need to focus on education. The next slide is, of course, the submissions by member states also included some comments on the Sendai Framework outcomes and goal. And when it comes to education, a submission by UNESCO highlighted that risk levels are escalating much faster than resilience in the education sector. So increased ambition and action is needed. And of course, related to that, one of the major obstacles to building the resilience of education sector systems in the face of disasters is an overall lack of capacity and readiness by countries to undertake initiatives to build resilience. So more risk, but still we need more investment to build the capacity of countries to deal with this new context. And the third point is many countries in the submissions have really highlighted the need to prioritize the education sector, as disaster risk reduction education is one of the tools in preventing hazards from becoming a disaster. Next slide. So yes, so under the priority number 1 of the Sendai Framework, understanding disaster risk. So a few submissions have identified a number of best practices in the field of school infrastructure vulnerability assessment. So now, in terms of understanding, we first need to understand what are the risks and what is the vulnerability of school buildings, which was highlighted by countries. On pillar 3 of the CSSF, so climate change and DRR education, many countries have really referred to the need to reinforce public awareness and education. And some have also highlighted some research and training initiatives involving not only primary and secondary schools, but also involving universities, the tertiary sector. And last but not least, but a third point is quite a few countries have also highlighted the need to further integrate risk assessment into education management information systems. So we need to be able to track the impacts of disasters on education. And the last point is that a few submissions have made the link between education and indigenous and local knowledge as key to improve DRR in many contexts. So that was on the priority number 1, and on the priority number 2, which is focusing on strengthening disaster risk governance. Quite a few countries have highlighted initiatives to strengthen governance at national, but also at subnational local level, and often involving the education sector. Like, for instance, some countries have mentioned that the education stakeholders have been involved in consultations related to DRR policymaking, which is, of course, a good progress. And as noted in the Americas report on behalf of countries from the Americas, and a challenge is that DRR is still largely regarded as a sector in itself, which means that there is limited integration of disaster risk management within education and other key sectoral policies due to this kind of siloed approach. And a best practice is the Caribbean Safe School Initiative, which is going to be presented by one of our government speakers later today in this webinar. On the priority number 3, investing in DRR. So of course, quite a few submissions have highlighted achievements related to developing resilient school infrastructure guidelines, like construction guidelines for schools to be resilient to disasters, but also increase investments, not only in build back better after disasters, but also in terms of building better before to prevent disaster impacts, and of course green school infrastructure as well. Next one, please. And on pillar 3, climate change education, the majority of submissions have referred to initiatives to mainstream DRR and climate change in education curriculum, but even more submissions recommend to scale up existing efforts in order to create a DRR generation through education. And last but not least, on the priority number 4, disaster preparedness. So many initiatives have been introduced at the national level. And next, Lucille, at the national level as well as the sub-national level. So it's not only about ministries, but it's also working with schools and preschool institutions to build and strengthen disaster preparedness. Greetings to our new audience members. And just the last point, a bit anecdotal, because it's a presentation by GADRRRES, quite a few submissions have given some examples of projects involving GADRRRES members, such as Save the Children, World Vision, UNICEF, and the Red Cross. And I think maybe the last slide is that the submissions have already also covered Target D on reducing disaster damage to critical infrastructure, including educational facilities. Target D, which has been introduced by Soichiro in the previous presentation. And in the submissions, quite a few countries have acknowledged that. Sorry, I lost the slide. Acknowledge that they have failed to actually meet these targets. It has been one of the major challenges which has been identified by countries. Target D, we need much more investment, much more support to prevent and reduce disaster damage to educational facilities. And related to that, submissions also point at the lack of data. It's not easy to plan and invest without data on disaster impacts on education. I think maybe that's the last point, and that of course, a key recommendation by UNESCO in its submission was at the first step to develop specific disaggregated and context-specific targets and indicators supporting the implementation of the Sendai Framework in the education sector. Next slide. Yes, and so just for more information, you may go to the website of the midterm review to read the full submissions by 60 countries. And you may also contact GADRRRES if you wish to receive the full version of the report we have just been presenting right now. Over, and thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much, David, for sharing with us the results of the analysis of the country's submission to the midterm review for the Sendai Framework through education lens. This was very informative, and we hope it's an inspiring action from local to global level. So we are now going to give you the whirlwind tour of the comprehensive school safety framework. For this, we will display the video of the global launch of the comprehensive school safety framework that took place in September 2022.
Human actions have created the climate crisis. So, children from Pakistan to England and small island developing states such as mine are on the front line of the climate crisis, leaving education and basic school safety up in the air.
The program has reached 27,000 schools in Indonesia, resulting in regional policies on CSS along with guidelines and modules for the implementation.
Major strategies have been implemented individually in different Caribbean countries to improve school safety. 19 countries are signatory to the CSSI.
When we look at the goals of the Comprehensive School Safety Framework, we see 3 key goals here where we are absolutely aligned with you, and which makes us so eager to support and endorse the Comprehensive School Safety Framework.
As Save the Children, I can confirm today that we are endorsing this new framework, and we will be applying it in our work around the world and with our partners.
I think this new iteration of the CSSF comes at a very timely moment when there are more threats than ever facing education. And I really feel that its importance can't be overstated.
We're taking a strong collaboration approach across all partners, as well as a whole of society approach that's reflected in this socio-ecological model that underpins the CSSF. Really, the idea is to bring everyone together to address some of these hazards, right down from the household level up through to the systems level.
This is really a critical step, a condition, so to say, for building resilience, so that all children and all students can learn in schools where they are safe and protected.
Children's learning, particularly at a time of crisis, needs to be prioritized. Marginalized children need to be prioritized. And it's absolutely critical for each and every one of those children, but for their families, communities, and countries as a whole, that indeed we are successful.
The areas that we've really tried to focus on collectively as an alliance for the framework have been, number one, to really look at protecting learners, educators, and staff in schools and other learning spaces. To look at strengthening education and protection continuity and really limiting the disruptions to learning that children have been facing, and also to promote knowledge and skills of learners and duty bearers in relation to risk reduction and resilience building.
We believe that this framework will provide countries and partners with a coherent approach to the multiple risks that face children as they try to go to school and learn.
Our Prudence Foundation fully supports and endorses the work by the Global Alliance for Disaster Risk Reduction and Resilience in the Educational Sector, GADRRRES, to produce the revised Comprehensive School Safety Framework to protect children's education from all hazards and risks.
One of the major efforts we've made as an alliance is to try and ensure that there's strong alignment between the CSSF in a number of different interrelated global frameworks that are supporting safety, resilience, DRR in the education sector for children.
Countries and partners should endorse the framework to collectively escalate their ability to protect education from the ravages of war and other hazards, and ensure that students and educators can learn and teach in safety and acquire the knowledge and skills to build more resilient, just and peaceful society.
Government and community should come together in improving school facilities so that learning is accessible and pleasant for every child.
I think we should look back at the Convention of the Rights of the Child, as the aims of education hopes to help the children live peacefully and protect the environment.
So what is next? We are asking that every national education authority, with support from the National Disaster Management Organization, convenes an ongoing multi-stakeholder coordination mechanism with all of these potential partners, and that together you hold a national launch webinar to socialize the comprehensive school safety framework. We encourage you to mount campaigns for endorsement and support in your country and in your region to build the momentum. GADRRRES will be supporting you with a series of guidance, documents, and templates, as well as translation of the core comprehensive school safety guidance, regional GADRRRES affiliates, the translation validation process, and plan your national launch webinars. Now, this year marks the midpoint in the implementation of the Sendai Framework and the other global agendas, but also the 10 years since the introduction of the Comprehensive School Safety Framework. During those years, countries have made a number of gains and have learned lessons that are worth sharing. So now we are really delighted to hear from 4 countries, St. Vincent, the Grenadines, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Mozambique. Will be sharing with us the key messages of the work with the school safety framework. I would like to invite our first government speaker, Idilia Ferdinand. Idilia is the Senior Education Officer, and she's going to showcase the Caribbean region, specifically St. Vincent and the Grenadines context and achievement. So Idilia, the floor is yours. Go ahead.
Pleasant good morning or good afternoon to everyone. I extend warm greetings from St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Small island developing states in the Caribbean face many challenges in addition to those created by hazards, which can hinder the achievement of key development goals. All sectors of our society are at risk, but our children are among the most vulnerable population, and our school some of the most vulnerable structures. The complex nature of challenges faced by SIDS were manifested in St. Vincent and the Grenadines through multiple hazards over the last 4 years. These include dengue fever outbreak in January 2020, COVID-19 in March 2020, volcanic eruption in April 2021, and Hurricane Elsa in July 2021. All sectors of our country was impacted by these phenomena, but some more than others, including the education sector. The Caribbean Safe School Initiative, which is the region's contribution to the worldwide initiative on safe school, is a framework used to implement comprehensive school safety as a means to address risk in the education sector. The launch of the Caribbean Safe School Initiative and Regional Roadmap in Antigua in 2017 brought much focus and success towards a more resilient education sector across the Caribbean region. To date, as you've heard, 19 countries have signed on to the Caribbean Safe School Initiative, which is country-led with support from regional and international development partners. The Regional Roadmap on School Safety represents both national and regional priorities, including an enabling environment and 3 pillars of comprehensive school safety, which was presented earlier. There is a commitment by signatories to meet in a ministerial forum with partners to report, share, identify gaps, and update the roadmap to guide the way forward. The last forum was conducted in St. Martin in 2022, and the next is planned for St. Lucia in 2025. St. Vincent and the Grenadines initially signed on to the Worldwide Initiative for Safe School in Turkey in 2014, contributing to the development of the Istanbul Roadmap, thereby making a commitment to make school safety a national priority. With the launching of the Caribbean Safe School Initiative in Antigua, SVG also signed, further cementing the government commitment towards comprehensive school safety. The Ministry of Education fully understands the importance of integrating disaster risk reduction into the education sector with all of the challenges that we face from hazards. And so we are championing the Caribbean School Safety Initiative as well as the Worldwide Initiative for Safe School. To this end, we have seen progress across the 3 pillars and the enabling environment. Some of the achievements under this initiative are as follows. St. Vincent and the Grenadines successfully hosted the second Caribbean Safe School Ministerial Forum in 2019. That forum provided the opportunity for updating the roadmap as well as for 6 additional countries to sign the Antigua and Barbuda Declaration on School Safety. The second ministerial forum was preceded by the first Caribbean Safe School Initiative, Caribbean Safe School Youth Forum, which provided an opportunity for 17 people, young people, from 9 Caribbean countries to engage in discussion on the Caribbean School Safety Initiative and forward a resolution to the ministerial forum. Young people represent a significant proportion of the education sector. Hence, SVG considers their voices as critical to the implementation of the school safety program. Persons of education and is fully integrated in planning in the education sector. There's a national school safety policy that was approved by Cabinet in 2019 and is earmarked for review based on the recent disaster experiences. All of our schools from early childhood to post-primary now have access to a model school disaster plan, which they can use to guide and adapt to suit their own school context. In conjunction, many schools have formed school safety committees, organized professional development sessions for staff, increase awareness for students, and sensitization for parents. Some schools have done complementary training in areas such as fire safety and are undertaking drills and exercises to test their plans. The education sector in St. Vincent and the Grenadines also benefits through technical support from the Caribbean Safe School Initiative to access a range of tools and resources, such as the Enhanced Building Condition Assessment tool, which assesses the level of safety and greenness in our schools and schools across the Caribbean. This tool was piloted in several states, including St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and presently in collaboration with the National Emergency Management Organization, the tool is integrated with the annual shelter assessment program. Our secondary schools also have access to a climate change, mitigation, and adaptation and disaster risk reduction curriculum, which was developed for our lower secondary schools from Form 1 to 3. To support the rollout of this program, we have provided training to pre- and in-service teachers and other stakeholders to assist in the delivery of this curriculum. And there are plans to further support the drive and integration across subject disciplines. St. Vincent and the Grenadines also benefited from collaboration with the sub-regional group, the Organization for Eastern Caribbean States, and in 2018 would have supported the development of guidelines for disaster resilient schools, taking into consideration design, location, and construction. The project was done in consultation with schools, construction professionals, and other stakeholders to develop and review the guidelines. It is expected that with such guidelines in place, that all new schools will start out as safe schools and existing schools will be improved to safer standards. The Ministry of Education collaborates with national stakeholders to implement its school safety program, including the Red Cross, the National Emergency Management Organization, the Fire Department, Physical Planning, Central Planning, the Ministry of Health, and other agencies. Some of the initiatives include the Tsunami Smart Project, volcanic hazard activities, and resilient communities, which incorporate schools in their planning process. With all of that support and intervention, St. Vincent and the Grenadines fully endorse the comprehensive Safe School Initiative as a means to ensuring the education sector is resilient and school safety is a priority for a sustainable future. We appeal to all our stakeholders and development partners locally, regionally, and internationally to continue to work with us to to ensure that our educational institutions are safe spaces for students, teachers, and other users. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Idilia, for sharing this brilliant but also coordinated and inspiring work undertaken in the Caribbean. And next, we are very delighted to acknowledge the presence of the Minister of Education, Culture, Research and Technology of the Republic of Indonesia, Suharti, PhD, Secretary General of the Ministry of Education, has recorded a message for us. So go ahead with the video, please. I think it's not sound.
We need sound. Can you try please with the sound?
Comfortable learning environments for our students. We are here responsible for ensuring that more than 56 million students and more than 5 million educators in 500,000 schools nationwide are safe from the disruptive impact of disasters in Indonesia. Considering our geographic location surrounded by the Ring of Fires, we must be prepared to face the risk of volcanoes eruptions, earthquakes, floods, and even tsunamis. And our experience shows that such a catastrophic events can put our education systems on hard and total disruptions. Learning stops, schools are closed, and worse, our students and educators safely are threatened. On top of that, we also concerned with the pressing issues of climate change. We have first-hand experience that climate change makes disasters more frequent and disruptive and further threatening our educations. And since only a decade ago, more than 60,000 schools and more than 12 million students have been impacted, and the number keeps rising. We must act now, and we cannot even afford the loss. And to rebuild what has been destroyed is not easy by itself. Imagine the cost of buildings in education systems that is partially crumbling by disasters. And without actions, our nation's futures might falter. The recurring natures of disasters and the impact of climate change calls for an urgent need to enhance awareness and preparedness within educational institutions. Many schools need a comprehensive disaster reduction plan, while teachers need training to respond effectively to emergencies. Addressing this challenge requires ensuring that teachers receive adequate trainings to seamlessly integrate disaster risk reduction educations, climate change adaptations, and also mitigation strategies into their curriculums and also teaching methods. Inadequate infrastructures also presents a significant obstacle. Schools in vulnerable areas often need more infrastructures to withstand disasters and the impacts of climate change. These schools usually need a more adequate earthquake-resistant design and adequate drainage system to cope with the floods. And furthermore, a lack of early warning system makes these buildings vulnerable to damage, thereby risking the safety of students and also educators. Nevertheless, amidst these formidable challenges, Indonesia has achieved remarkable milestones. We have implemented the Satuan Pendidikan Aman Bencana or comprehensive school safety programs that has successfully heightened awareness among students, teachers, and communities regarding disaster risks, climate change impact, and also preparedness. These programs also ensure students acquire crucial knowledge and skills in disaster preparedness, response, recovery, and also sustainable practices to address climate change.
Thank you very much to Harti for sharing with us the amazing experience of Indonesia and for the key message, it's time to act now. So now we are very delighted to acknowledge the presence of the Ministry of Education of Malaysia, Dr. Norisa Binti Suhaili, Deputy Director General of Education Malaysia, the School Operations Sector, has recorded a message for us. So go ahead with the message. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum and warm wishes to all. On behalf of the Ministry of Education Malaysia, I am honored to share the experience from Malaysia on this important topic of education and its role in implementing the Sendai Framework. Every country in the world is exposed to many kinds of disasters. Without exception, Malaysia had experienced various disasters from climate change, such as flood and drought, hail, landslides, epidemics, and pandemics. Ideally, schools should be safe learning spaces where children and teachers are protected from all risks. To better safeguard and protect those at schools, we need to instill a DRR culture within students and teachers. As such, the Ministry has established disaster management committee at all levels within the Ministry, including at schools level. The Ministry has produced guidelines, manuals, and circulars as references for students and teachers to respond to every kind of disaster. In addition, the Ministry has formed a smart support team consisting of school counselors that support students to be more resilient when facing post-disaster effects. In Malaysia, we have made considerable progress in advancing education and resilience building efforts, including increasing access to education and training, as well as improving the skills of educators. Within Malaysia, the DRR programs in schools have been organized independently by civil society organizations with access from the Ministry. Upon this discussion, we realized that the need for greater coordination from various ministries to ensure better integration of disaster risk reduction efforts within the education sector. Therefore, we are now coordinating with relevant authorities, relevant parties to provide them with information on schools most impacted by disasters and a platform for sharing experiences, lessons, tools, and resources to achieve a greater impact on children's resilience through the Disaster Management Committee. Currently, we are working closely with UNICEF and other NGOs to bring together best practices in Malaysia to ensure that programs conducted are effective, meaningful in communicating DRR knowledge to students and teachers. Our intention this year is to organize disaster risk reduction school programs to around 100 primary schools, which is 1% of the whole primary schools in Malaysia. Thus, this will be the first step towards improving awareness of natural hazards and fostering a culture of preparedness among our children. Ladies and gentlemen, as educators, we understand the key roles that educators have in instilling a culture of disaster risk reduction in schools. With this in mind, the ministry plans to enhance the knowledge of DRR amongst teachers. We are also exploring all possibilities of establishing a network of DRR youth champions consisting of students selected from schools that are part of the DRR school program. This would allow the students and teachers to continue getting the training and information they need to be local champions in their area. In addition, ladies and gentlemen, I must say that all state and district officers will be provided with trainings to build their capacity, skill, confidence, and knowledge in DRR, so they will be able to assist schools in DRR programs. We recognize that much more needs to be done to ensure that education is central to the Sendai Framework implementation from 2023 to 2030. We must work together hand in hand to strengthen partnerships between governments, civil society, and the private sectors to advance education and build more resilient communities. Therefore, we call all member states to prioritize education in the Sendai Framework implementation plans to ensure that all children have access to quality education that will equip them with the skills and knowledge needed to build resilience and thrive in the face of natural hazards.
Thank you very much, Dr. Norisa Binti, for reminding us the importance of put children and teachers at the center. So now, last but not least, we are pleased to acknowledge the presence of the Minister of Education and Human Development of Mozambique, Pedro Cosa, National Director of Division of Cross-Cutting Issues, has recorded a message for us.
Bom dia a todas e a todos. Eu chamo-me Pedro Alberto Costa, diretor de Assuntos Transversais do Ministério da Educação e Desenvolvimento Humano da República de Moçambique. Queria de informar que Moçambique é um país vulnerável devido à sua condição geográfica e razão pela qual é ciclicamente afetado por eventos climáticos extremos, com elevado impacto socioeconômico devido à destruição de infraestruturas econômicos e sociais, como é o caso das escolas, e com a consequente paralisação das aulas. E devo dizer que Moçambique estabeleceu princípios e mecanismos para prevenir e reduzir o risco de desastres e os seus impactos. E esta abordagem, tanto esta redução de desastres, está devidamente integrada nas políticas e estratégias nacionais. Temos aqui como exemplo a Agenda 2025 e o Plano Quinquenal do Governo. E é uma abordagem que responde ao compromisso africano de redução de risco de desastres e as agendas internacionais, como é o caso do quadro de Sendai, para redução de desastres e os Objetivos de Desenvolvimento Sustentável, tanto, nomeadamente, o Objetivo de Desenvolvimento Sustentável número 4 e número 11. No âmbito, portanto, destes princípios e mecanismos de prevenção e redução de risco de desastres, o setor da educação tem vindo, portanto, a trabalhar no reforço e no aumento da resiliência da escola e da criança, sendo que já tem aprovado normas técnicas de construção resiliente de infraestruturas escolares e produziu, com o apoio de parceiros, instrumentos de construção de resiliência escolar que prepara, portanto, as escolas na implementação das medidas de redução de risco e desastres. Vou me referir, portanto, ao instrumento que é o guião de elaboração do plano de emergência básico escolar, que orienta as escolas como, portanto, desenvolver um plano mínimo que possa ser implementado antes, durante e pós-emergência. Portanto, a elaboração deste plano de emergência básico escolar é feito a partir da criação de comitês escolares de gestão de desastre na escola, que são comitês representativos e participativos. Eu terminaria por aqui agradecendo mais uma vez o convite que nos foi enviado. Muito obrigado.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cosa, especially because you remind us the importance to work in the schools and the commitment and participation. Unfortunately, we are past of the time. We don't have time to answer your questions, but we are going to continue this discussion in other similar events. And also, we are trying to answer your questions. You are going to have the recorder of this session. So to finalize this webinar, I would like to thank all our speakers for their inspiring work, and all of you, the participants, for your time and your commitment to the school safety and for the child rights and resilience in the education sector. Thank you very much and goodbye for now.